My name's Grant Davis. I'm chairman of the London Cab Drivers Club and editor of the Badge newspaper. We're here today regarding the Employment Law Tribunal hearing last week at the Supreme Court with Uber. What's the ramifications for Uber? And more importantly, what's the situation and how does this affect the London cab trade? I'm here today with Danny O'Regan, committee member, and we're going to have a full and frank discussion and hopefully you'll find it informative. So, let's crack on, shall we? Hello, and welcome to our latest video on the new LCDC YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be discussing this. Last week's court ruling on the Uber Employment Tribunal. I'm here today at the LCDC with committee member Danny O'Regan, who's been following this case and Uber for many, many years. So let's get on and discuss. Danny, what do you think the implications are for Uber after last week's result?
Well, on a lighter note, I should imagine nothing, because they've been telling drivers they've been earning £16 an hour anyway before commission, so it won't affect their minimum wage, will it? But I would say you've only got to look at the media.
They're all over it, aren't they?
All over it. You know, mainstream media. It's been on the telly. It's a significant ruling, isn't it? In regards to the workers' rights. There's a little word of caution. This won't be
an overnight.
It won't be. In the near future, there's going to be many changes. Uber are going to wait and hold out until they're required to do it. They technically they're right in saying that only a couple of drivers, the claimants in the Supreme Court, this affects them, but we know full well there's probably about 10,000 waiting. There's probably a few. I mean, that in London, there's in Helen Chapman's statement and recent refusal hearing, she said there was 45,000 drivers logged onto the app, registered with them.
So theoretically, Dan, 45,000 Uber drivers going forwards could make claims for sick pay, holiday pay.
That's right, backdated, minimum wage. There's also not just Uber London, this affects the UK as well. So
Uber Britannia,
they've got probably in the region of about 10,000 to 15,000 drivers. Also, it could be, presumably, drivers who have maybe left the app recently.
Can go back and claim back earnings.
Possibly. And, I mean, you've only got to look at a turnover of new drivers. TfL, I think, in the last 2 years have issued in the region of about 23,000 new licenses to private hire drivers. The majority of them will be probably going onto the Uber app and registering with Uber, so it's a significant number.
So for us as cab drivers who's had to put up with trying to earn a living with this onslaught, and it has been an onslaught of private hire licenses in the car, just going to work, put the sat-nav on, put the Uber app on, and we're told that we have to compete with this. This could really be a major spoke in the business model of Uber.
It all depends. No one knows what Uber are going to implement, how they're going to change their model, how, economically it makes sense that they're going to have to restructure, they're going to have to streamline, they're going to have to maybe put drivers on contracted hours, shift patterns.
But Dan, this ruling, this one that was last week, it's Uber, but would you say this would affect all the new incumbents into London, the Bolts? And where does this leave Addison Lee, Dan?
Well, I think Addison Lee, more or less, it'll be down the line, it's done. This ruling, I mean, in fact, Addison Lee, I would imagine, was probably a stronger case for the drivers, for the fact that, they got their own fleet.
That the drivers rent.
I mean, The significant point in the Uber judgment is it's clear that Uber were principal in the contract.
And when you say principal, Dan, there'll be people watching this who will think, what does Danny mean, principal? What does that term mean,
well,
Dan?
basically, who's providing the service? Who is the transport provider to an extent? So, I mean, was it the agent? Was the driver the agent working for the principal, either Uber? Uber tried arguing, no, we're the agent of the driver. It's the contract is between the passenger and the driver. We just more or less we're the middleman, and we just allocate the jobs, etc. But this ruling blew Uber out of the water on that. And in the actual ruling, if you look at the judgment, it steers, and it is steering to the fact that because we have the regulatory framework of private hire operators where they have to accept the bookings, they mark it in their cells, etc. And they pass the bookings to the drivers. It's steering to the way that all sort of minicab private hire operators are the principal in the operation. So
that could be a major positive for the cab trade, Dan. Do you think?
It could be, possibly. I mean, I should imagine there'll be a few private hire operators looking at the way they run their companies, the way they treat their drivers, the way they, the sort of power they exert on their drivers. They'll certainly be looking at that, I would imagine.
So with the VAT implications, Dan, because we know with the Good Law project that years ago, Jolyon, when he tried to get it up and running, I know the club made a significant donation to start that process off. That's been fantastic, isn't it? For the VAT side of it.
I can't see how Uber could get out their obligations with regard to VAT. This was before this ruling anyway. HMRC,
under a lot of pressure, weren't they?
HMRC were looking at it. That and the reason why they were looking at it was because of the Jolyon. He effectively made them look at it. But this ruling, I mean, there's no two ways about it. They are the transport provider, Uber, being principal. They should have collected VAT. Going forward, they
does this also
have to collect VAT.
Does this also mean that Uber fares would have to go up 20% because there's VAT on the fares then, yeah?
That, again, we don't know how Uber are going to operate it, but they would certainly probably have to charge that, whether they swallowed that increase and, instead of putting 20% on the fares, which they'd have to charge it, whether they charge 20% more is, no one knows, do they? But, I mean, it'd be a financial hit to Uber if they'd done that. 20%.
Be a massive hit, Dan, wouldn't they?
It'd be massive, yeah, massive.
And the thing is, Uber always say that they don't make a profit. You had the Uber accounts the other week, Dan. What are their tax implications? What are they declaring, Dan?
See, it's slightly different because what they do, they take the bookings, the payments taken in Holland, as you know, for Uber BV. And when it comes to Uber London's accounts, they get paid for services provided to Uber BV. So effectively, Uber BV takes the money in Holland, and they pay Uber London to run the operation in London. So it's services provided. So it's not really linked to the actual fares.
Yeah.
So Uber BV paid Uber London to run the London operation. Well, it's amazing, isn't it? The last accounts, 2019, they never paid no corporation tax. In fact, they got a tax rebate.
Uber got a tax rebate
of £134,000, something like that region. And the reason, and that was on a £6 million profit. Now the reason why is because they paid share options out to their staff. It's amazing, isn't it? But the VAT implications. In my opinion, that'll probably be settled before all these drivers, the actual drivers, and the implications to what Uber are going to do with their model when it comes to the drivers. But it's
And if Uber turn round and say, you know what, that was the court ruling, but we don't think we're going to instigate it. In the latest government DFT report, there'll be consequences for Uber on that score as well, Dan, won't they?
Government, in the task and finish report, the government response, well, naturally, I mean, fitness and propriety comes into question, you know, if the way you run your company operation. They've highlighted the fact that, you know, if you've got a VAT obligation which, you know, you don't collect the VAT and you try circumventing, you know, collection of VAT, or drivers,
you don't bring in
worker rights, anything what, you know, will question your fitness and propriety. Government has said, you know, licensing authorities should take that into consideration. But
so theoretically, Dan, if Uber refused to, say, pay the VAT, if they refuse to bring in the driver's rights, the mayor and TfL have the power to say, until you meet your obligations, you're not having a licence.
They could certainly look at their licence and call their, you know, fitness, whether they're fit and proper, you know. But getting back to the actual employment side, it's kind of, it's not a blanket. They've been found, all workers, they have to now pay every driver minimum wage. They have to, you know, after their expenses. It's slightly, each claimant has to make a claim to say, I'm a worker.
Wow.
So effectively, what happened is, you know, in the ruling, the claimants at the Supreme Court are now classed as workers. The 10,000 prospective ones, what we know about, when they make the claim, it'd be found that they are workers. So they will have to apply them 10,000.
And like you said, Dan, in Helen Chapman's last statement at the Uber licence hearing, she said she believes there's around 45,000 drivers who work for Uber registered on the app. So in all intents and purposes, 45,000 drivers, if they wanted to, could claim from Uber.
They certainly could.
Wow. That's massive, isn't it? That's massive.
It could be. I mean, again, no one knows what Uber are going to actually do when it comes to complying. I mean, economically, you would guess that they're going to have to bring in changes. Well, they obviously will. I mean, do they bring in something like fleet insurance? Because it's, if you remember, it's minimum wage after expenses. So how would they get round to knowing, well, you drive this vehicle, you've got, you know, what's X expense on insurance, but do you rent that vehicle? Is it your own vehicle? How would they work out, you know,
the costings
of a vehicle when it's his own private vehicle, what he's using maybe 10 hours a week? It's a complicated process, but as I say, it's not been done and dusted.
Right.
There'll be another hearing how this is going to work.
And it'll be instigated on Uber.
How much drivers will be, how they'll be compensated.
But as you know, Dan, the cab trade's been at war with Uber for such a long time. The judgment last Friday was almost like a glimmer of light for the cab trade, wasn't it?
It was. And, you know, the biggest, we know full well what type of company Uber are. You know, they've now been deemed exploitative. We know full well through the regulatory side, they've had their licence, you know, refused twice. We know full well, you know, avoiding law enforcement and regulatory action. We know about data breaches with the culture, the sexual harassment within their own company. It's, you know, it's not unreasonable to say they're a toxic company and how they've operated in the past. So, but going forward, you know full well, Uber will string this out.
As long as they can.
They will go as far as they can. They've got an army of lawyers and barristers. They will do whatever they can. You know that full well.
So sort of summing up this today, Dan, it's good news, really, for the cab trade, isn't it? But it puts a whole heap more of pressure onto Uber, isn't it? And it's been bad publicity for them. And it's great for the cab trade that they're being seen
again, it's bad publicity to them. How many times can they take these hits? But I mean, the implications could be significant, especially, I mean, one aspect we haven't discussed is the fact that in this ruling at the Supreme Court, they didn't really touch on the multi-apping aspect. Now, we know through Freedom of Information requests, there's something, 28,000 drivers in London what registered with more than one operator. So it's not unreasonable to say that the vast majority are going to be Uber drivers. Now, when Uber bring this ruling in, will they require drivers to
be Uber only?
Sole exclusivity to Uber. What will happen with other operators? Will other operators then say, well, hold on, we need these drivers to keep...
They can't share. They can't share.
Possibly, but that ruling hasn't... There is no ruling in that judgment to say whether it's lawful or not, or... I mean, it'd be quite hard. If you're contracted to Uber, and you're getting minimum wage for Uber, and you're working for someone else, how can you get minimum wage for them? You can't be employed the same by two people. So effectively, that's left unanswered. But if
that's still there to be discussed.
It's still there, but logically speaking, if you're Uber, you're going to want your drivers.
You want your pound of flesh.
Well, that's
if you're paying them,
you're
rates.
You're directing them, you're telling them when to work, when not to work, when to log on, when not to log on, what jobs you take.
They're your drivers.
Yeah,
they're yours.
I mean, they'll be telling their own drivers you can't cancel jobs. Like they do now.
Yeah.
So they'll exert certain more power on their drivers. Not only that, that would probably open them up for a full employment claim.
Oh my God. Lovely.
It's a can of worms for them.
So, from last week, like you said, it's not done and dusted. It's not as black and white as you think.
No, it's not.
But it can only really be a good thing and a bit of good news for the cab trade, and we waited a long time for that.
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks, Dan. Well, we're going to wrap it up at the moment, but I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you like the new LCDC YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and leave a comment and ask some questions, because that's really what this whole YouTube channel is aimed for, engaging with the drivers. We're having a discussion, but we want you to come here and sit there as well and have a discussion with you. So, as I said, thanks ever so much, Dan, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, what do you think about that video? How do you see the decision on Uber affecting the cab trade and your livelihood? Go to the comments underneath and maybe come back to us with a question that you want answered. I really want to hear what you've got to say about Uber, Transport for London, and the cab trade as a whole. It's really important now with this. We can engage with all the cab trade in London and work with you with TfL. So I want to hear your voice. Please leave a comment, leave a question. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.